what's the difference between a creator and an influencer? And I began to describe them as fraternal twins because they look so much alike. But if you look close enough, there's little differences and little nuances. And I always say too, when I head into it, a creator can be an influencer and an influencer can be a creator. So that's why the lines are very gray.
Welcome back. As promised, we have part 2 of my conversation with Denise Vitola. If you did not hear part 1, you can go back to last week's episode with Denise, who is an influencer and creator industry expert. She's been in this space a long time, worked at a big company, heading up influencer and creator. But in addition, she is a creator herself. She has a wonderful perspective on what is going on within the industry, how it's evolved. And in part 2 of this conversation, we talk about some of the things that people are talking about within this industry, like what's the difference between a creator and an influencer? Are they different? We talk about trends that are coming up in the space. And we also talk about what the value is of having partnerships with really good, with influencers who know what they're doing and what the value of that is for companies. And then ultimately where we see things going. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it with Denise. And here we go with part number 2 of my conversation. Okay, so Denise, another topic that we need to talk about is the report that came out late last year, I believe, from Goldman Sachs. And they talked about the creator economy being worth somewhere between $250 billion and $480 billion by 2027. And it's interesting because this report came out and I think people were like, excited. And those of us who work in the industry were excited about it. But I think what you really need to understand too is what is Goldman Sachs talking about when they talk about the creator economy? And I think there's a very broad definition that they're using in terms of, what it includes the content creators on the platforms like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all of that, plus anybody, I think, who works to create that content. When you saw this report, what did you think?
Well, first of all, it came out around the time where I was deciding to go all in on influencer and leave the company I was at, where I was overseeing PR, influencer, and social. And I had made the decision to go all influencer. And I saw this report and I'm like, wow, I had some foresight there. But I also was extremely excited for the industry, but agree with you that people need to take a look and unpack it a little bit, because I'm glad you bring up it's not just influencers or even creators, and we can talk about what the differences are there, but it's tools as well. So think about Adobe, think about CapCut. These are huge tools, and people making huge investments in video platforms and AI and overlays, so many things that go with it, sounds and voice and audio. So the industry is quite huge. It's a tremendous industry. And if you go to any of the influencer conferences, you will see I'd say probably 55% technology. And I think that's where a lot of people are investing, is in the technology. And of course, the influencers and creators are tapping into those technologies to make the end product of what they're putting out there on social even better.
I feel like part of what's happening within the industry is that people are using creator. They're using the term creator. They're using the term influencer. I remember seeing this Digiday article a couple of months ago, and it was all about this, a conversation about the use of the word creator, the use of the word influencer. And I remember reading it and thinking, why is there not one creator or influencer who is interviewed for this article? I personally have heard from many people who make money by building a following and sharing content. I have heard from them that the reason they do not want to be called an influencer is because they think there is a negative connotation with being called an influencer, because it feels like, oh, you're just here for a money grab, which I think is that for people who have worked so hard to create this following,
Right.
they're not going to throw away that status just to talk about a brand that doesn't make sense for them to talk about, because their audience will react negatively.
Yeah.
So people who don't really work with creators and influencers day to day, they don't really understand what it takes for them to do what they do and what responsibility they feel towards that community or that audience that they're building. So I want to get into that. But first, let me ask you, how do you see the difference between the term creator and the term influencer?
The line is very gray. And how I've been describing it, and I've had to host sessions about what's the difference between a creator and an influencer. And I began to describe them as fraternal twins because they look so much alike. But if you look close enough, there's little differences and little nuances. And I always say too, when I head into it, a creator can be an influencer and an influencer can be a creator. So that's why the lines are very gray. But if we're looking for how I define it, a creator can create content and is mostly interested in creating content. So we're still talking about lo-fi content, but they're creating on the higher end of lo-fi content. And dare I even say some of them, they're creating outstanding content. So these are folks that you potentially would enlist to create social platform appropriate content, but not necessarily buying into them for their communities that you're talking about. We're not buying into that understanding of the community, understanding of maybe their power to influence the communities that they're serving. This is all about creating awesome content. And they have followings because they have such cool content. So it's like a TV show. If it's got some really cool content, people are going to watch it. So creators inherently can have followings as well, but that's not their focus. The creation of this great content is their focus. So looking at influencers who also can create really awesome content, but what they're interested in is building that community, in talking to their community about the things that they truly believe in. So there's this myth that influencers will shill anything. And perhaps there are people out there, because we're talking about hundreds of millions of people. But our real influencers are really the ones that have spent a long time understanding why people are following them, what they owe to these communities, what their communities expect from them, and what they're interested in. So they're not going to, let's say it's a health and wellness influencer, they're not all of a sudden going to start talking about the trendiest dress that's on the market. If it has something to do with health and wellness and it's a good workout dress, then maybe they will incorporate it, but they're not going to go off brand. And that's why, brands and anybody that's hiring influencers should enable these influencers to contribute to the brief, because they do understand their communities and the content that works better than any of us ever will. So think of it as building the community, understanding the community, and creating content for the community. And then on the other side, where we're talking about creators, it's about creating the content first. And then if the community follows, that's a nice to have.
Right. And I'm with you. I think that is a good way to think of the distinction between the two. But, if we think about where Goldman Sachs, starting with, the fact that they valued this industry by 2027 up to basically $500 billion.
Yeah.
If we think about it in that context, how do you think the industry is going to evolve or has evolved since all of this hype around the value?
What's funny is when it first came out, then I started reading reports about investors investing less in the industry. And I was like, how is that happening? And then I'm reading something that's saying that brands are spending more. And I think that there was so much hype around this article coming out and so many people having a POV on what's going to happen, that there was this mixed bag of information that has since gone away. And according to industry reporters, spending on the investment side has gone back up and brands continue to spend hand over fist. So
Mm-hmm.
what it's creating are huge opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
But people, brands that want to work with influencers, influencers that want to work with brands are spending more time to understand each other. And I think that that is really at the core of what's very important here. If this industry is going to thrive, we need to become more sophisticated. And I always say this, and I use this term, and everybody kind of like laughs at me when I say it, but it's true. There's a lot of bad actors out there, both on the influencer side. So you're going to hire an influencer and sort of at first blush, they look pretty good. They have a good following. Their content looks pretty decent. But when you start to create a relationship with this person, their experience in working with brands is at the sort of amateur state, and they're not the best person to partner with. So you have to make sure that you're partnering with the right partners, whether you're on the brand side or services or whatever it is, that can help you navigate that. And there's so much to understand between brands. How does a brand show up and partner with an influencer? And I think bad actors on the brand side too, in that they think they understand how to work with influencers and they want influencers to act like commercials. And that's not the way to do it. So there is a lot of opportunity with a lot of education.
So can you talk a little bit about what you think the value is when you get to work with people who are good, who know what they're doing? What do you think brands can take from that?
I have a great example. I first met Jamie Hess, and people might know her as NYC Fit Fam on Instagram and TikTok and other platforms. So she's really Instagram heavy. And I met her. We were both awarded Women's Health Action Hero with Women's Health Magazine for 3 years in a row. So we worked together on different programs that the magazine was executing for these rounds of influencers. They were emerging influencers. Jamie sees the day and sees the moment. And interestingly enough, the one thing I love about her so much is we both have a very similar background in that we both worked in PR. And I quickly became friends with her and continued to work with her, and her influence on Instagram rose. And I think, God, she must be up to like, I don't know, 500,000 followers on Instagram. She has a fantastic podcast called the Gratitudeology Podcast. And she has a course now that she just launched called Brand Ninja, teaching other people how to become influencers. And I love this course because she is really a ninja when it comes to understanding how to work with brands. And if you really want to understand how to work with brands, this is a girl who knows. And why does she know? Because she grew up in PR. So she takes every opportunity and she looks through the entire marketing mix. So on one of the brands I worked with her on, she brought an opportunity to be on, she used to have a other podcast. So be on this podcast. I'm having an outside event for kids and parents are going to come to it. You can be in the gift bag. You can also be part of the podcast. You can be part of the event. I'm going to put this all on social media. You're seeing all of this, like all of the elements. How could I say no? And she shops this around to a lot of brands. And then boom, she has this major event and major moment that's going on. That's because she truly understands marketing. Now, I don't expect everyone that steps into the influencer space to have a background in marketing and understand how it works. But I do expect people, if this is the industry that you are going to be expert in, and this is going to be your job, then you do need to educate yourself a little bit. And it's not just taking a product and talking about it on social media. I've brought Jamie to the places I've worked to come and speak on stage. I'm speaking at Adweek Social Media Week, and I invited Jamie to come speak on stage with me. So she's a keynote speaker, so there's opportunities beyond just the walls of social media. Yeah. So, I think it's about people understanding what their role actually will be. And as the industry grows to what Goldman Sachs is predicting, that is what they're predicting. They're predicting influencers to go beyond just the walls of social.
Yeah. I love that explanation. And I think you're right. I mean, look at some of these creators who are making brands out of, I mean, Mr. Beast is obviously the one that always comes to mind for people because he, built his influence and now has, burger joints and all this other stuff that he has built from his social media presence.
There are so many influencers that people don't even know their names that have handbag lines, that have yoga pants lines.
Mm-hmm.
The coffee integration with Charlie D'Amelio and Dunkin' Donuts. There are so many of these things going on, and that's really smart. Perfume lines that some of these influencers have as well, and it's quite brilliant.
Yeah. So if we think about where the industry is moving, if you had a crystal ball, and I never think about this industry much further out than 6 months because it changes so rapidly. So much changes so rapidly. But I would love if you could share, what do you think people should be focused on, be thinking about, and have an eye out for over the next, maybe through the end of the year? What do you think is important for people to think about?
I'm going to be a little bit provocative here and bold. And one of the things that I think about a lot are the partners you work with. And there are people that are being hired to execute programs for some pretty big brands and messing it up. And then you hear from these large brands or these companies that are very ripe for influencer programs, and they're coming around to people like you and me and saying, yeah, not really interested in doing that because it doesn't work. I'm like, fall out of my chair. What do you mean it doesn't work? It works better than anything else that's on, that you can reach consumers with. Mm-hmm. But because somebody stepped in and messed some things up, like you said, measurement is advancing so far. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many people I've met with over the last 2 months that tell me that they can't measure. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, a true influencer agency has been in this industry for over a decade. Mm-hmm. So when not many people were thinking about influencer marketing. So now that it's this shiny new toy, you have every advertising agency, media buying agency, PR agency saying, oh, let me hire somebody like Denise who can come in and build this. No. I may be good, but I'm not that good. And nobody is that good. So again, like these brands are turning to, I already work with this PR agency and they say they do it. So I'm not going to go search for an influencer agency. Mm-hmm. Let me just have them do the program. Well, right. They'll do it. Will it be fine? It'll be fine. But do you wake up every morning to be fine, or do you wake up every morning to be amazing? Right. And if you want to be amazing, you need to make sure you're aligning with the best partners.
So Denise, in thinking about, so we talked about where you think the future is in this industry. I saw a report, I don't know, last year also, where the number one thing that kids now say they want to be when they grow up is an influencer, is a social media influencer. So yeah, a lot of kids are interested in this industry. Do you think that that's going to continue, or do you think it's like, oh, this is the new thing, so it's the shiny new thing, kids are into it? Do you see this 5-10 years down the road?
I do. I actually really do. And I think people will get better at it because I think people are going to begin teaching each other like Jamie's doing with Brand Ninja. Mm-hmm. And it actually makes me smile when people do say that. And I'm sure you get this a lot too. But when I tell people I work in influencer marketing, they immediately want to know how I can make them an influencer.
I have had so many conversations with Uber drivers who have a side hustle of building their social media following. Yeah. And, tips and tricks that I can give them. Yeah. It's everywhere, Denise. It's everywhere.
It really is. It really is. And I love it. I really do, because I think it's a really fun channel. I think it's true stories from real people. Your phone is a mini computer that you carry around every day. It's your TV. It's your camera. It's your bank account. It's everything. I would be lost without my phone. New platforms will pop up, and there's going to be a lot more opportunity for people to enter the influencer space. However, not everyone can be an influencer. So give it a try if you want, but have a backup plan.
Well, and yes. And to that point, it's a lot of work. I mean, you and I both know, talking and knowing and working with influencers who have staying power, creators who really are in it for the long haul, that it is not an easy job. It
Yeah.
is share of mind. It's like 24/7.
Yeah.
You need to have like a mind towards, oh my God, I might have people commenting on that post I did. If I'm trying to build community, I've got to respond. It is not as easy, I think, to do it over the long haul and to do it successfully as some people might think. So that's why, to what we said earlier, working with the good ones, the people, the creators and influencers who have shown that they have staying power, they understand what
Mhm.
they're doing. It's so valuable because
Yes.
there's a lot of lessons that they learn every single day. Denise, thank you so much for spending this time with me and for all of the, I think, really insightful points that you've talked about. If people want to follow you, what is the best way for them to do that?
I'd say on Instagram, Dee's workouts. So I always say it's DEEZ and then workouts with a Z. But LinkedIn is where you can find a lot of my more professional or corporate type POVs. That's just Denise Vitola and Fit Foodie on TikTok. I should probably make everything pretty consistent, but I like to keep the magic in everything and keep people guessing. So you can find me on those 3 channels.
Thank you for listening. If you're an influencer or a brand that wants to work with us, please feel free to email us at info@shespeaks.com. Until next time.